The internet has a terrifying obsession with the space beneath the floorboards. Facts of the Nancy Guthrie case. I ask you to hit that subscribe button right now. The back door was left wide open like a gaping wound, but the real horror was waiting to be discovered on the front steps. What exactly transpired between the moment the back door was breached and the moment the victim was taken? The answers lie in the forensic markers left behind, a trail of evidence that forces us to reevaluate every assumption about how this crime unfolded. If this was a simple burglary gone wrong, why leave the back door open only to drag the victim out the front? This glaring inconsistency is the first major red flag for detectives. It indicates a level of physical resistance that no one expected from an 84-year-old woman. The evidence waiting at the front porch will soon provide a horrific answer to these impossible questions. The answer to the structural paradox of the house is written in biological evidence. As the crime scene technicians shift their focus from the propped back door to the front entrance, we are stripping away the rumors to reconstruct a timeline written in biological evidence and shattered plastic, a discovery that definitively upgrades this case from a missing persons report to a violent abduction. There is no hidden compartment beneath the bedroom floorboards. That is an internet fabrication. The real evidence is right outside the front door, exposed to the elements. Forensic teams identify a significant concentration of biological traces smeared across the concrete steps and the immediate entryway. Samples are carefully collected and rushed to the laboratory for expedited processing. The DNA analysis returns a confirmed match. The biological material belongs exclusively to Nancy Guthrie. This is the moment the timeline becomes terrifyingly clear. The presence of her DNA at the primary threshold proves that a violent physical altercation occurred exactly where the intruder should have been most visible. To understand how this happened without anyone noticing, investigators turn to the home's digital security footprint. Modern homes leave a digital trail, and Nancy's residence is equipped with a front-facing camera system. To understand how the mother of a prominent television anchor vanished into the night, we law enforcement analysts pull the data logs from the network and isolate a highly specific timestamp. At exactly 1:47 in the morning, the camera system experiences a sudden and catastrophic failure. The hardware is not simply turned off or disconnected through a software glitch. According to verified police reports, the camera unit is violently yanked off its mounting bracket. Someone physically overpowered the security device to blind the digital eyes of the house. This deliberate act of destruction is the apex of the attack. It is the exact moment the struggle breaches the threshold and spills out onto the front porch. The perpetrator destroys the camera precisely because they are forced to use the front exit against their original plan. The presence of biological evidence directly beneath a destroyed security device tells a story of unexpected resistance. An 84-year-old woman with limited mobility somehow managed to force her attacker out the front door, must first understand the anatomy of a crime scene that makes absolutely no logical sense. Perhaps she was trying to scream for neighbors. Perhaps she was attempting to trigger a larger alarm. Whatever her strategy was, it resulted in a brutal confrontation that left her DNA on the concrete and the camera hanging by its wires. But this revelation only deepens the central mystery. If the attacker broke in through the rear entrance undetected, why would they risk dragging a Struggling victim out the front door where street lights and passing cars could expose them. It is a tactical disaster for any criminal. It contradicts the careful planning required to target an isolated elderly woman in the middle of the night. The intruder successfully breached the quietest part of the property, but then executed the extraction in the loudest, most visible way possible. This specific contradiction is the most baffling element of the entire crime scene. A back door left wide open, a front entrance stained with DNA. The biological traces confirm the violence. The shattered camera confirms the exact time, but the geographic flow of the attack remains completely illogical. Why enter through the back only to leave through the front? If you see the glaring inconsistencies in this forensic puzzle exactly the way we do, I want you to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. We are looking at a scene that defies basic criminal logic. Someone broke into the quietest part of the home but violently ripped a camera off the wall at the most exposed entrance. The pieces do not fit together smoothly. The initial breach and the final extraction point belong to two entirely different profiles of behavior. The investigators staring at the broken plastic and the stained concrete are realizing they are not hunting a common burglar. They are dealing with a scenario that requires a much deeper dive into the surrounding darkness. The answers cannot be found solely on the front porch. A security camera violently destroyed at exactly 1:47 in the morning. These are not internet rumors. To understand the full scope of this violent extraction, law enforcement must cast a wider net and look beyond the immediate property lines. They need to find a digital ghost. The destruction of the primary camera was a calculated move, but the perpetrator made a critical miscalculation about the density of surveillance in modern suburban neighborhoods. The darkness outside is not as empty as they believed. The destruction of the camera at 1:47 in the morning successfully blinded the immediate crime scene, but it could not erase the perpetrator from the surrounding environment. The investigation rapidly expands outward, utilizing every available resource to track the movements of whoever breached the Guthrie residence. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos takes command of the operation. He quickly steps in front of the press to clear up one of the most common assumptions in missing persons cases. He officially confirms that law enforcement has completely cleared the family of any involvement. These are the verified pieces of a puzzle that local police and federal agents are desperately trying. Tommaso Cioni and his wife Annie are entirely cooperative, and their timelines are verified. There is zero evidence pointing to a domestic dispute or an internal family conflict. This official clearance is crucial because it forces investigators to look outward toward an unknown external threat. The national spotlight intensifies when Savannah Guthrie, the prominent television host, makes an emotional public plea for the safe return of her mother. This intense media coverage puts enormous pressure on the detectives to produce actionable leads. They need a visual confirmation of the suspect. They begin executing a massive canvassing operation, pulling surveillance footage from every residential doorbell camera and commercial security system within a multi-mile radius. They are looking for a needle in a digital haystack. They are scanning hours of dark, grainy video, looking for any movement that aligns with the 1:47 extraction time. Their meticulous forensic timeline finally pays off. To put together, while the clock ticks down for a woman who relies on daily heart medication to survive. Exactly 25 minutes after the camera at the Guthrie house was violently destroyed, a secondary surveillance camera further down the street captures a crucial piece of evidence. A solitary figure emerges from the darkness. The footage is chilling in its calculated anonymity. The individual is clearly male, but his identity is completely obscured. He is wearing a mask that covers his facial features, and his hands are hidden inside gloves, preventing any accidental fingerprint transfer. This is not the erratic behavior of a desperate criminal looking for a quick score. This is a deliberate display of forensic countermeasures. The alleged suspect moves with purpose, but the most significant detail captured on the video is not his face or his clothing. It is what he is carrying. Secured to his back is a very specific piece of equipment. Federal analysts enhance the video frames and successfully identify the item as an Ozark Trail hiker pack. Every second counts. Every piece of misinformation spread online wastes valuable investigative resources. This is a ubiquitous black backpack commonly sold at standard retail stores like Walmart. The identification of this specific brand is a massive breakthrough for the Behavioral Analysis Unit. An Ozark Trail backpack is incredibly common, which makes it the perfect camouflage for someone trying to blend into a crowd or evade complex tracking. But its presence at a violent abduction scene tells a much deeper story. A perpetrator does not bring a large hiking backpack to a simple residential burglary. You bring a bag of that size when you plan to carry specialized tools for entering a secure building. More importantly, you bring a bag like that when you need a way to conceal or transport items away from a chaotic scene. The black backpack is the physical manifestation of premeditation. The masked figure walking through the cold suburban night was fully equipped for a complex operation. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wore gloves to defeat forensic sweeps. Our goal today is to focus entirely on the confirmed reports from law enforcement and major news outlets. He wore a mask to defeat facial recognition, and he carried a high-capacity bag to facilitate his objectives. Every single piece of evidence, from the cleared family members to the masked figure on the tape, leads to one terrifying conclusion. The person who forced their way into the house was not looking for cash or jewelry. They bypassed the valuables sitting right on the table. They bypassed the cellular phone and the purse. They left the material wealth untouched because their primary target was the 84-year-old woman herself. The backpack and the disguise prove that they arrived at the property with the singular intention of taking her away. This was a targeted extraction masked by the quiet darkness of a suburban neighborhood. The investigators now have a timeline, a confirmed point of violent struggle, and a physical description of a ghost carrying a black backpack. For weeks, millions of people have shared the exact same viral theory about what crime scene technicians. We will trace the final known movements of the victim. But finding a man whose face is hidden and whose gear is sold in thousands of stores across the country requires more than just video evidence. It requires a mistake. And as the days turn into weeks, the digital ghost is about to make a move that will pull the investigation into an entirely new and far more dangerous direction, involving the complex and untraceable world of digital currency. The investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie entered a frustrating period of silence that tested the resolve of every federal agent on the task force. As the initial shock of the bloodstained porch began to fade from the news cycle, a new and far more complex layer of criminal activity started to manifest through the family's private communication channels. Throughout the month of February 2026, the silence was broken not by a phone call, but by a series of chillingly anonymous letters delivered with surgical precision. These were not the rambling notes of a disorganized opportunist. They were ransom demands. We will examine the bizarre contradictions found at her home. According to confirmed reports from CBS News and the Associated Press, these communications specifically bypassed traditional delivery methods to ensure they left no physical forensic trail for the FBI to follow. The contents of these letters were verified as having a high degree of credibility because they contained specific details about the interior of the Guthrie home that only someone who had been inside the property could possibly know. The demand was as modern as it was difficult to track. The perpetrator was not asking for a suitcase full of cash or a bank transfer that could be frozen by federal authorities. They demanded an undisclosed amount to be paid entirely in Bitcoin. This shift into the world of digital currency changed the entire temperature of the investigation. It signaled that the individual in the mask with the Ozark Trail backpack was not just physically capable of a home invasion, but also technologically proficient enough to manage an untraceable financial transaction. And we will look closely at the shadowy masked figure caught on surveillance video carrying a specific brand of backpack into the dark. The use of cryptocurrency creates a digital wall that traditional law enforcement often struggles to climb. While the family and the public waited for a sign of life, the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI worked to verify every single word in those ransom notes. 2 of the letters were confirmed by investigators to be authentic, while others were dismissed as cruel hoaxes from internet trolls looking to capitalize on the tragedy. This influx of false information created a massive burden for the analysts who had to cross-reference every claim against the known facts of the crime scene. Savannah Guthrie and her family were forced into an agonizing position of waiting for instructions while the clock ticked on Nancy's medical needs. To increase the pressure and hopefully flush out a witness, the family officially announced a staggering reward of $1 million for any information leading to her safe return. This massive sum of money was intended to break the loyalty of anyone who might be harboring the kidnapper. But as the reward climbed, the actual leads remained terrifyingly thin. The reality of this abduction requires no embellishment because the clinical facts alone are enough to keep you awake at night. The investigation was caught in a valley of uncertainty where the physical evidence of the struggle at the front door met the digital wall of the Bitcoin ransom. Every day that passed without a sighting of the black backpack or a breakthrough in the digital trail made the situation more dire. The investigators were forced to ask if they were dealing with a professional kidnapping syndicate or a lone wolf who had spent years studying how to commit the perfect crime. If you feel the weight of this standoff as much as the investigators did, I encourage you to hit that like button to help ensure this case stays in the public eye. We are looking at a perpetrator who managed to vanish into a suburban neighborhood with an 84-year-old woman and then had the audacity to taunt the family with digital demands. The tension during this period was a slow burn of dread because the letters confirmed Nancy, this is not a ghost story. This is a meticulously planned intrusion that shattered the quiet security of a suburban home. Was alive at the time they were written, but they offered no guarantee of her continued safety. The FBI began a deep dive into the metadata of the digital demands, hoping the kidnapper would make one small technical error that could reveal an IP address or a physical location. They were hunting for a ghost in a machine while a family prayed for a miracle in the real world. The resolution of the paradox between the open back door and the violent struggle at the front, entrance finally comes into focus when we analyze the behavioral geometry of the crime scene. For weeks, the public was distracted by baseless rumors about hidden evidence under the floorboards, but the professional profilers were looking at the movement of the victim herself. The peak of this forensic analysis reveals a sequence of events that is both heroic and heartbreaking. Based on the positioning of the DNA traces and the timing of the destroyed camera investigators, now let us step onto that front porch right now and look closely at exactly what the forensic technicians actually documented. Believe that the perpetrator did indeed enter through the rear of the home as originally suspected. He likely used the propped open back door as his primary breach point, believing he could take Nancy Guthrie by surprise while she slept, but he fundamentally underestimated his target. Despite her 84 years and her limited mobility, Nancy appears to have detected the intruder before he could reach her bedroom. Instead of cowering, she made a desperate and calculated run for the most visible part of her house, which was the front door. The forensic markers prove she reached the threshold and was attempting to exit onto the porch to alert the neighborhood or trigger the doorbell camera. This explains why the biological evidence is concentrated at the front step and why the perpetrator was forced to violently yank the camera off the wall at 1:47 in the morning. He was not planning to leave through the front. He was forced to move the struggle into the open because Nancy refused to go quietly out the back. To comprehend the sheer statistical anomaly of this case, we have to look at the target herself. This realization shatters the internet myth of a secret discovery inside the house. The real discovery was that Nancy Guthrie fought back with everything she had. The perpetrator had to overpower her in the light of the front porch, which is why he was caught on a secondary camera 25 minutes later with his mask and his backpack. He was in a state of tactical recovery after an extraction that had gone completely wrong. The open back door was likely left that way as a failed exit route or a red flag that Nancy created to ensure her family knew something was wrong. This peak in the investigation proves that the crime was not a smooth professional operation, but a chaotic struggle against a woman who refused to be a passive victim. The presence of the Bitcoin ransom demands further confirms that the kidnapper was trying to. Abductions of the elderly are exceedingly rare. They almost never involve the level of strategic planning seen here. Regain control of a situation that had become far more public and violent than he intended. By forcing the struggle to the front porch, Nancy Guthrie ensured that the world would see her attacker, even if only as a masked silhouette. She turned his quiet abduction into a national manhunt. The tragedy is that the very act of resistance that provided these clues also left her in a state of extreme physical vulnerability without her medication. The forensic logic is now undeniable. The back door was the entrance, but the front door was the battlefield. Every piece of shattered plastic from that camera is a testament to a woman who fought to be seen. This clarity brings us to the most difficult part of the timeline, where the trail of the masked man with the Ozark trail backpack begins to move into the shadows of the dark web, where physical evidence is replaced by encrypted code. The current state of the Nancy Guthrie case remains one of the most haunting open files in recent history. Despite the $1 million reward and the high-profile nature of the victim, no one has been able to definitively identify the man in the mask. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is a woman who lives a quiet, structured life dictated by necessity and routine. The search for the specific Ozark Trail hiker pack led investigators to thousands of potential purchasers, but without a facial match or a unique identifier, the trail has gone cold. The Bitcoin ransom demands eventually ceased, leaving a void of information that the FBI is still trying to fill. One of the most significant unresolved questions concerns the transport of the victim. In a quiet neighborhood at 1:47 in the morning, a man walking with a large backpack is suspicious. But a man forced to move an 84-year-old woman would almost certainly require a vehicle. Yet no specific car has been linked to the crime scene with enough certainty to issue an Amber Alert or a public bulletin. This gap in the surveillance record suggests the perpetrator may have parked blocks away or used a vehicle that perfectly blended into the local traffic. Furthermore, the question of Nancy's medical condition hangs over every update. Without her heart medication, the window for a safe recovery narrows with every passing hour. According to verified reports from major news organizations, her mobility is severely limited. She cannot move quickly. Law enforcement continues to monitor the blockchain for any movement of the requested ransom funds, hoping that greed will eventually lead to a traceable mistake. They are looking for a single login from a non-encrypted server or a purchase that links back to a physical address. The case is a standoff between traditional detective work and modern digital anonymity. The family remains in a state of perpetual vigil, clinging to the hope that someone saw something they have not yet reported. A man with a backpack on a cold January night. A masked figure walking with a strange gait. A car idling in a place it did not belong. These are the small details that could still break the case wide open. Until then, Nancy Guthrie remains a missing person, and the front porch of her home stands as a silent witness to a struggle that the internet tried to turn into a ghost story, but which the facts prove was a very real, very human tragedy. Supposedly uncovered, hidden beneath the bedroom floor of a missing 84-year-old woman. More importantly, she relies on a strict regimen of daily heart medication just to maintain her baseline health. What this case teaches us about the evolution of modern crime is that the intersection of physical violence and digital anonymity has created a new breed of predator. We can no longer rely solely on the idea of a secure home when our digital footprints can be used to monitor our vulnerabilities from a distance. The Nancy Guthrie abduction is a clinical study in why we must prioritize the security of the elderly who are often targeted specifically because their routines are predictable and their physical defenses are low. From a forensic perspective, it highlights the absolute necessity of redundant security systems. A single camera is easily destroyed, but a network of neighborhood surveillance is what eventually provided the only image of the suspect. On a larger societal scale, this case serves as a warning about the spread of digital misinformation. While millions were distracted by the sensationalized idea of evidence hidden under a floorboard, the actual investigators were fighting against a clock that was being drained by false leads. Every aspect of her physical condition makes her an incredibly vulnerable target. When we prioritize entertainment over evidence, we inadvertently provide cover for the guilty. True crime is not just about the thrill of the mystery. It is about the cold, analytical process of seeking justice through verified facts. By focusing on the biological evidence at the threshold and the specific equipment used by the perpetrator, we move closer to a resolution that is based in reality rather than fiction. The safety of our communities depends on our ability to distinguish between a viral theory and a forensic truth. The search for Nancy Guthrie is still active and the man with the black backpack is still out there. The investigation into the digital footprint of the kidnapper has revealed a series of encrypted pings coming from a very specific region that matches another cold case we are currently researching. If you want to see how the forensic profiles of these two crimes might actually overlap, she is not someone who could simply wander off into the night and disappear without a trace. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now to dive into our next breakdown. The truth is often hidden in plain sight if you know exactly where to look. Thank you for seeking the facts with Ronan Noir Files, and we will see you in the next investigation. She is not someone who could fight off an aggressive intruder or sustain a prolonged physical struggle without severe medical consequences. Her life is entirely incompatible with the violent, chaotic nature of a home invasion. Yet, on the evening of January 31st, 2026, someone decided she was the perfect victim. The timeline of that night begins with a completely ordinary family dinner. There is nothing in the police records to suggest any preceding conflict or unusual behavior. At exactly 9:48 in the evening, her son-in-law Tommaso Cioni drives her back to her residence. He pulls into the driveway and make sure she gets inside safely. They traded whispers about secret compartments and concealed evidence. 2 minutes later, at 9:50, the garage door smoothly glides shut. This specific timestamp is critical. It establishes the final confirmed moment that Nancy is known to be safe inside her own home. The closing of that garage door is essentially a lock, sealing her in for the night. She is completely alone. The house is quiet. The security system is armed and functioning normally. Tommaso drives away, believing his mother-in-law is secure and ready to rest. He has no reason to suspect that the darkness surrounding the property is hiding anything out of the ordinary. But the reality is that the safety of those locked doors is merely an illusion. Nancy is moving through her evening routine, completely unaware that she has already been chosen. Her limited mobility means that if someone were to enter the house, she would have almost. But federal investigators and official police reports reveal a truth that is far more chilling than any online fabrication. There was nothing under the floor, zero chance of escaping through a window or running to a neighbor's house for help. Her reliance on medication means that any disruption to her routine is inherently life-threatening. She is essentially trapped in a space that is about to be breached. The silence of the house provides a false sense of security. As she prepares for bed, the minutes slowly tick by. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight. The neighborhood is fast asleep. There are no witnesses awake to notice anything strange on the street. There are no passing cars to illuminate the shadows creeping toward her property. She is isolated in the dark. The sheer vulnerability of an 84-year-old woman living alone is terrifying when you realize what is coming for her. The sound of Tommaso driving away was the last normal thing she would experience. The real nightmare took place out in the open where anyone could have seen it, but no one did. After the garage door closed at 9:50, the timeline goes entirely dark. Nancy is left alone in the stillness of her home. She does not know that a meticulously planned sequence of events is about to begin. She does not know that the clock is steadily counting down to 1:47 in the morning when her entire world will be violently shattered without any warning. The sun rises on February 1st, bringing an unsettling silence to the Guthrie residence. Nancy has a rigid schedule, and attending her local church every Sunday morning is a non-negotiable part of her routine. When she fails to arrive for the service, her absence sends an immediate ripple of concern through her social circle. She is not the type of person to skip an appointment without calling ahead. She is meticulous about communication. By late morning, the creeping anxiety turns into formal action. The evidence was not buried out of sight. Concerned individuals contact the authorities, and local police officers are dispatched to her address to conduct a standard welfare check. When officers arrive at the property, they find a scene that instantly escalates their response from a routine check to a full-scale criminal investigation. The house is entirely silent, but it is not secure. As they navigate around the perimeter, they discover that the back door has been forcefully breached and left propped wide open. This detail is crucial. A door left wide open suggests a hurried exit or a deliberate attempt to alter the airflow and visibility of the crime scene. Inside the house, the atmosphere is heavy with sudden disruption. Officers sweep the rooms looking for any sign of the 84-year-old woman. The home does not show the typical signs of a massive ransacking. Furniture is not completely overturned. Drawers are not entirely emptied in a frantic search for valuables. But the items left behind tell a terrifying story of involuntary departure. It was smeared across the front porch in plain view. Welcome to Ronan Noir Files. Resting on a table in plain sight are Nancy's cellular phone and her personal purse. For a woman with limited mobility and strict medical needs, these are absolute lifelines. She would never voluntarily leave the premises without her phone to contact her family. She would never step out the door without her purse, which contains her identification and essential items. The presence of these belongings confirms the worst fears of the responding officers. She did not leave this house on her own terms. Someone took her. The police quickly establish a perimeter and call in specialized crime scene technicians to process the property. The initial theory, based on the visual evidence, seems relatively straightforward. An intruder targeted the back of the house to avoid detection from the street. They breached the rear entrance, grabbed the victim, and forced her out the same way they came in. If you are ready to look past the digital noise and examine the cold, hard forensic, it is a logical assumption for a home invasion. But as the technicians begin to thoroughly document the scene, they uncover physical evidence that shatters this preliminary theory entirely. The evidence does not align with a quiet abduction through the back garden. The true focal point of the violence is located at the exact opposite end of the house. Investigators are forced to ask themselves a disturbing question. If the intruder broke in through the back door, why is all the critical evidence located at the very front of the property? This structural paradox changes the entire trajectory of the investigation. It means the initial breach was only the beginning of a much larger struggle. It means the perpetrator did not simply grab her and vanish silently into the backyard. Instead, a violent confrontation must have dragged all the way through the corridors of the house to the main entrance.